to the left shoulder. Okay, so when I set up, that would be that N0 location. Okay, now it doesn't mean that it's affecting angle of attack or anything like that, just for reference. Okay, because it may or may not, depending on how my delivery is. So my angle of attack could be completely different. Yes, if I move the ball position, but I'm not saying that that angle of attack is going to be always that number. Okay, it depends on a lot of things. It could be the shaft, it could be the wrist, it could be anything. But why this is important is if I have a student who, let's say, is back east, and he calls me and says, well, Dana, you know, my setup feels weird. Okay, take a picture, because that's going to be the next thing I say every single time. So I say, okay, so send me a picture of that address position. Well, I say, well, you know, your ball position's at B2. Normally it's at B1 or N0. So why don't you change that first and tell me how your feels are? Because here's an example of where you were 2 weeks ago. And they do it, and sometimes that helps. Okay? So the N0 location would be right off that shoulder. Anything that's back of that would be a ball position. So it goes all the way back to my right shoulder. That'd be like B8. Now, the wider I am, the more I work out, I might add a 9. I tell people I have a 9, but it's really 8. Anything that's forward of the N0 position would be an up to 4. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, where would that really help? Well, high shots, maybe around the green, or like hitting a driver, maybe my handle's behind the club head. Okay, does that all make sense? Yeah, okay. Now, that also coincides with the handle locations. Okay, so I have the handle position that can be forward, it could be up 1, 2, 3, 4, it could be back as well. Okay. Now, from there, you have some players, like with Daniel's case, where there might be some baseline shifts. So the more that I move to the right or to the left. And those are coincided as well. Okay, so that's just basic on the setup. Then we have the attachment, and this is all, we call this in the P1 realm. Okay, so position 1 is your address, and these are some things that you would look for. The other thing is you have axis tilts, okay? You have forward bends, you have pelvic bends, you have neck bends. So you have all these different bends that are going on, and at P1 you're looking for that. I know Martin talked about the external rotation of the leg, the femur. Okay, that's coming from your hip joint, all right, and your toes. Okay, really important, especially if somebody has poor hips. Really important. Okay, so does the player have some side bend to the right? Are they close to being neutral? Okay, if you're doing chipping or anything like that, I see a lot of guys come in and get strong grips, a lot of secondary tilt, can't get the ball in the air, right? So they start manufacturing all this stuff. They're like, okay, well, let's educate you on the setup conditions. Same with the driver. They start going this way with it. Okay, does that all make sense? So I'll move to P2. Okay, now P2, this is kind of interesting, because this is where we start getting into mechanics. And I hope I don't put everybody to sleep. But
$40.
I'm not exciting, so this is going to be very boring. So the first condition, okay, so your first P1 position, you go to P2. Now what's interesting is there's a lot of ways to do it, a lot of different ways to talk about it. Some guys say, well, I hit really good when I just do this and I turn and turn. I'm like, well, what's going on when you did that? Well, what you did is you externally rotated right shoulder, so one like that, which is a big one I'll get into later, okay? So when I did that, okay, what did that really do? Okay, I radially deviated my left wrist. My right wrist added some flex, and my right elbow externally rotated via the right shoulder into my body. So it's like that. It's a lot better than probably going like this, right? Or going like that to try to take it back, or whatever I'm doing. So from point of measure, you know, if I have a player who sends a video, typically all my players are supposed to send videos to me before they're allowed to take another lesson. Now it sounds crazy, but if they have an iPhone, send it, please. Just send it over, because I'm not giving you the next lesson. Okay? A few of you know that, by the way. So when I go to section 2, what am I looking for? Now, we live in a time and age when we have swing catalyst here, awesome product. When you go to P2, what's going on? So there's a section in there where, I'm going to call this my pressure trace on the ground, or my center of pressure. So I'm sitting here, and what do we normally need to create? We need to create dynamically a push-off, right? There's some of that. So at P1, where's most of my weight at address? It's slightly forward, maybe 60%, maybe we might think it's 50-50, but there's got to be a little push-off. So when I go to P2 and I push off, do I instantaneously go into extension? No, I have to manage this, okay? And what this all turns into, and I got to give Mac a little credit, again, not that he needs it, he'll probably say I'm wrong, even though I'm right. He was a big one on rates. He wanted everything to have a specific rate. So my body would turn, and it would start to move into section 2 at a specific rate. Okay, it wasn't just jump over it. Now, dynamically over time, once I learned to do it, it would happen. Okay? So from section 1 to section 2, I'm pushing off. My center of pressure is moving. It's moving diagonally. Hopefully this way. But let's say it does. Okay? And then my forward bend is here, and I'm starting to increase my leftward tilt. So I'm trying to keep my inclination to the ground, like Andy, right? So it's going like this. Now, when that's occurring, and my center of pressure, my weight, everything's moving this way into section 2, now I know my body structure is correct, my pelvis is working appropriately, and then I have some like contingent mechanical properties that I'm going to actually call them preferences. Okay, like I have preferences, and if you're a golf instructor, everybody has a preference. We all do, right? It's not just right when it comes to the mechanics. Sounds cool though, but we all have preferences. So at P2, I have preferences of the body. I like to see a little bit of transition into the right side. I like to see the forward bend maintained a little bit longer so that you can actually gain something to push off of, which creates some power. Okay? So that's P2 with the body. Now with the club, I prefer, here's my preference. I'm going to tell everybody this is like just throwing out my preference. Doesn't mean I'm right. I can argue, but let's just say you guys might have your own. Is I like the club head outside the hands a little bit. Not necessarily like Ricky Fowler. Okay? And by the way, I'm going to throw this out here. It's being taped. So I watched Ricky Fowler hit balls a couple weeks ago, and he's aiming to the right now. Okay? Ricky used to aim to the left. And Rick, his swing actually is really good. But I'm watching his practice swing, and he's really going like this. Because he used to go like this. And he still beat everybody going this way, as a junior, by the way. I like this. Some amount of it. We had Jim Furyk's picture up, right? Jim does that. So by the time that let's just say that if it does go this way, somebody in this room, their responsibility is to tell them just to kind of cool that down a little bit. Okay, not mine. But somebody in this room. Because if this goes this way, it's going to turn into that high handicap situation, and then they're going to have to aim to the right. Does that make sense? So just remember I said that. Somebody's responsibility, not mine in this room. Okay, so at P2, I like the club a little bit outside. Now the reason for that, we'll get into when we get to P3 and P4 and P5 and P6. By the time P10, hopefully I make my number and we're good. Okay, so at P2, if the club's too far in, there are issues risk condition-wise that could happen. The club head might not have enough ascent, but I prefer the club to be out here. Okay, you guys can develop your own. Okay, yes?
Sam, what about head position to go along with the forward bend?
Yeah, so your head at address, you could have, okay, we'll start P1 on that. You can have neck condition. I don't go too crazy on these because I'll start drawing lines on my hat. So your head would be tilted slightly 5 degrees this way, and then as you rotate, your head will start to neutralize, depending on neck flexibility. Some people can't do it. Their head will actually rotate this way. Good question, though, yes. But the head does translate a little bit to the right. So from P2 to P3, there's some significant conditions that have to occur, okay? Most high handicap players have that completely off point, okay? Now, I call a plane line a point of reference, but something that doesn't exist. Okay, so we're good on that. I said plane on the video, so, but it's only for reference. It doesn't exist, okay? So, at P3, which is lead arm parallel to the ground, which is right here, we can imagine that the shoulders have a rotational look of 90 degrees at that point. So I have a player, okay, good player, been told the information, knows what to look for, videoed it last week in the tournament, and it looked like he completely disregarded and went AWOL on what he was told to do. Not on all shots, but on a couple. So I sent the video, I didn't even take it, but I sent the video to him. I go, okay, look, this is exactly what you're not supposed to be doing. This is why the ball overhooked in the left rough, because you had the last minute to save it. I didn't know I did that. Good, so you're gonna go to the range tomorrow morning, okay? The caddy's gonna be there. He's gonna film one and you're gonna change that picture. Okay. Okay? Good ball hitting day that day. To him, it felt like he had no power doing it this way. So sometimes, you know, making these major changes and you go out on the golf course, it takes some discipline. You know, and I get that. I've been there, I've done that. But, you know, we just, like I said earlier, we live in a time where we have video and we have ability to take video of what we're doing and measure what we're doing, whether it's perfect or not. I mean, video is better than not having it. Use it, okay? So, anyway, back on the P3 situation. So, at P3, we still have some forward bend. We have the left side bend, okay? There might be a little extension at this point, not too much. Okay, I don't like guys to get unplugged. They call it unplugged. Okay, that's just saying something. But you know, if you have too much thoracic extension, there's going to be some repercussions down the road. So, does everybody understand what that means? Thoracic. Okay. So we want to have just enough. Okay. So that lines you all up for P4. So at P3 to P4, what are some things that start to be introduced? Okay. I call them arm loading patterns. Okay. So you have, this is your shoulder movement. Okay, and this is your elbow movement. So when I go back to P3, I will start, and I can't put this all on here because I'm not smart enough to do that. I just, no lie, I just figured out how to use this. So I'm in there scratching my head like, okay, I got to do this and download this. So at P3 to P4, what do we really look for? Okay, so when I get to P3, and I don't use an interlock grip unless I'm showing, so you're like, oh, he's an interlocker. Like, no, I'm not actually. So my right elbow starts to flex, okay? And then I have this thing, I'm going to throw a golf machine term out there, extends your action. How many of you guys know golf machine at all? Oh, 4 people. Some of you are lying. Okay, so we have, one of the good things about the golf machine is there's some terms in there that I do use. So extends your action, I talked about last night a little bit. And then we have these things we call accumulators. And the first pressure point is there, right? The first accumulator is my right arm, okay? So now we can go into right field here and talk about other patterns because there are some things that from P4 that I might do if I'm an inline player, okay? And does anybody know what an inline player would be? Be a player that swings kind of on a circle for the most part. Okay, or a draw bias player, and we have a player that would be like the Daniel Lim or Robert Rock pattern, which is a low cutter. Okay, their right arm movement is completely different. So you guys, how many of you guys seen Robert hit a ball? Joe has personally. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. So what do you guys notice about Robert's swing? This has like a look to it, right? It's pretty syrupy and fluid and some grace, and plus he likes scotch. Yeah, good hair, right? So what Robert's really introducing is, so comparative to Grant, would be more like pelvis driven, arms trail, all those type of things. Actually, Daniel and Robert actively straighten the right arm on the downswing without going that way. okay? And so what happens is they go like that. They straighten the right arm. Then when they do that, okay, their shoulder plane doesn't change. So kind of the pivot's more, kind of, we call it lefter, okay? But the shoulder plane doesn't side bend on the transition, okay? So anyway, that being said, that's why P4 is important. So if I have conditions that don't line up, that's why Robert has something that looks really stable and Daniel do at the top. So if this thing starts changing, my left wrist starts extending or whatever, they have to change that to get it back in line, okay? So anyway, that's some of the things I look for at P4. And then if I do have the weight characteristic, you see where the weight trace goes. Okay, so you see it kind of trail towards the right heel, inside right heel. All right. A couple things I see a lot of amateurs do is they don't really understand how to manage what their pelvis does. They don't know how to feel that. Okay, so they have to sometimes do training stuff. Now I put like on Instagram, totally just for fun because I think it's fun. Some things in the gym to do. Okay, and mainly so I can keep staying married. I try to keep this off because it's not my personality that's winning her over. So the I see a lot of amateurs. In fact, I had one guy the other day. He goes, "Well, yeah, I'm trying to keep my pelvis looking this way." And as he's showing me, I'm going like this because I'm trying to keep eye contact, and when he's doing this, he's actually lowering. And I go, okay, well, did you see what you're doing? He goes, well, no. I said, well, I'm trying to do this. It really helps me draw it. I go, well, sure it does. And plus it moves the low point right off your pinky toe. and he was trying, and I wasn't trying to be wise about it or anything like that. But he goes, well, yeah, it really helps me get past. I go, yeah, you got to have some amount of that. Let's just see if you actually do that. And he did, because he didn't ask me ahead of time, hey, do you think this is something